My city is crap for cycling. But is it as bad as you think? Every time we make a video where we say how liberating, how convenient, and how fun cycling in a city is compared to driving or catching the bus, we get a lot of people agreeing. But we also get a fair number of people who say, well, that's all well and good, but I can't ride because my city is shit for cycling. Now, it might well be shit, but I also hear the same thing said about the city that I live in and that I ride around and that I absolutely love. So something doesn't quite stack up. There are many different reasons why we might experience the same place differently. Your level of confidence on the bike, your age, perhaps even your gender. But I also wonder whether perhaps it's a knowledge thing. Maybe there are some tricks and tips that we could share that might make riding in a city that little bit less daunting, that little bit less stressful, and perhaps even a little bit less. We're also going to hear from someone who's been working tirelessly to help improve cycling in this particular city as part of the local authority. Perhaps they can shed some light on why it is the way it is.
It's easy to paint a line on a road, but that doesn't really necessarily make for good cycling infrastructure. If you're going to do it well, you want proper segregation, and that costs money. I think cities across the world more and more are recognising the car gives us great freedom and great amenity, but actually it's not right in the city that everyone should be in a car, because it just doesn't work.
Firstly, let's deal with what makes cities scary in the first place. We asked you lot on the GCN app. We had a lot of responses, many of which revolve perhaps inevitably around traffic. Volume of traffic, speed of traffic, and the size of vehicles as well. And then there's quite a lot about bike lanes, perhaps not enough bike lanes, or bike lanes that exist for a short period of time and then just disappear without warning. The list, though, goes on and on. But what can we do about that? I mean, we can't magically reduce traffic volumes or conjure up more bike lanes. Although we can actively campaign and lobby for them, but that's another thing entirely. I actually don't think it's necessarily about less traffic or more bike paths, though. Sometimes I think we just need to look for alternatives. Because I think the biggest mistake that many of us make is simply riding the same routes and roads that we drive. When we are in our cars, we'll look for the fastest route from A to B, which is generally the one with the fastest moving traffic or perhaps the shortest possible route. And so it's completely understandable to therefore ride that same route. But bikes are different. On fast roads, we go comparatively slowly. But on slow roads, we go a lot faster. We can take different routes because we don't get stuck in soul-destroying traffic jams. And we can take longer and perhaps more friendly alternatives because riding a bike is just nicer. And it's a heck of a lot more fun. So perhaps start by looking at a map. What are the roads that are not nice to ride on? And perhaps just as importantly, what are the junctions that are not nice to ride across? This is one such junction that I hate. Going from there across to there, you have to go over 4 lanes of traffic. It's always super busy, although this is as quiet as I've ever seen it, in fact. You can never make it all the way across in one go, but there's nowhere to stop in the middle because you've got people coming that way, turning right. I'm going for it. Oh no, I'm stuck. I'm stuck. So, rather than just feeling like I'm about to die, I've tried to find some alternatives. And there are 2. Neither are as fast, but for the extra minute it will take, it's just that bit more chilled out. I'll either turn left, then use the pedestrian crossing, or I take a completely different route entirely and approach it from the other side. There are a few dedicated bike routing apps out there that can help, but actually Google Maps has a cycling option that layers bike paths or good cycling roads over its normal map. Now, it's not available worldwide, but it's definitely worth having a look to see if it's an option in your area. Busy roads suck, don't they? I mean, personally, I don't mind too much about volume of traffic. What really gets me is traffic that moves a lot faster than I'm going. So slow traffic, okay. Fast-moving traffic, kind of feel a little bit like a sitting duck. So again, look for those roads that aren't nice to ride and seek out alternatives. My tip would be residential streets that would suck for driving but are great for riding, particularly the ones that are too narrow for two cars to pass each other, but are wide enough for a car and a bike. Of course, having a new route is all well and good, but how do you find your way? This is a bike-specific sat-nav, but you could also get an inexpensive mount that would allow you to attach your phone to your handlebars, where you can simply use it as a sat-nav exactly as you would in your car. If you do find a bike path, it might not be the promised land that you're hoping for. Not all bike paths are created equally. New York, for example, apparently has over 1,000 miles of bike path, more than any other city in the world. Except they're rarely segregated. People often park in them just like this, and they can be disjointed, meaning that you're on a bike path and then off a bike path again in the blink of an eye. My hometown has more than a few bike lanes like this, bike lanes that frankly sometimes I'd rather not use. Even this one, which is a textbook amazing segregated bike path, actually when you look closely is kind of annoying, because on the road you've got right of way, but on the bike path, you have to stop and give way at 3 side roads, which sort of makes you feel like a second-class citizen. So I have a lot of questions about bike infrastructure. So to that end, we've sought out someone that could help, someone that can shed light on the issues that local authorities face when planning infrastructure, and might be able to give us some advice on what we can do about it. So thanks so much for joining me. First question, I'd love to know your thoughts on what makes a city good for cycling.
Well, obviously, first off, good cycling infrastructure.
Okay.
Lanes, space for cyclists, but also, I think, culture. And especially lots of people cycling means that many people will know someone who cycles and may be more tolerant when they're driving in a car. Infrastructure is really important, and making sure that you've got good speed limits in place as well. 20 miles an hour or 30 kilometres an hour. As far as possible you can get, and making sure that's well enforced. And then there's something about the attitude of people. If you're getting a lot of anti-cycling rhetoric, particularly from your political leaders, then that obviously is going to encourage people maybe to treat people less well.
So talking specifically then about Bristol,
yeah,
where we are now, would you say Bristol is a good city for cycling?
I would say on the whole, yes. When we've looked at any of the statistics, it's got one of the highest mode shares for cycling of any city in the UK. It's pretty small by European continental standards, but I think that says to me that it's a good city for cycling. It's not perfect, it's a work in progress. Since 1990, there's always been some sort of dedicated cycling team in the council thinking about how you make things better for cyclists. And if you keep on going year on year, gradually you build a really good set of cycling infrastructure.
I think Bristol is a good city for cycling, so I'd like to get that out there as well. But there are inevitably going to be places where perhaps the infrastructure falls short, or you feel as a cyclist riding around that there should be more. So can I ask why there isn't more cycling infrastructure?
There's probably a number of answers to that. One of the best answers to it is money. It's easy to paint a line on a road, but that doesn't really necessarily make for good cycling infrastructure. If you're going to do it well, you want proper segregation, and that costs money. We've got it in a lot of places, and we're gradually improving it. Nationally, in the UK at the moment, we've got people saying that they're concerned about the war on motorists, which is not helpful. And actually, in Bristol, for the last 6 or 7 years, we've had a mayor who hasn't really pushed the cycling agenda. So we have stalled a bit. It took us many, many years to piece together, piece by piece, the infrastructure. And as you start to do that, more people come, and that creates the conditions that more people are cycling, and that makes the better case to fill in those difficult gaps where you've got those difficult choices and compromises to make.
It'd be really good to know what we can do as cyclists to potentially try and help. How do we get more bike infrastructure?
Make sure your voice is heard. We talk about the silent majority, and too often people don't engage with the political process, And most people don't really mind or are actually positively for it. Probably 80%, 90% of people are either not really that bothered or actually really for it. And I think one of the other important things to do is if you are writing in or engaging, join a campaign group or get your cycling group to write in, but don't all write the same letter. Have the same bullet points, but maybe write it in your own words, and that's much more powerful.
How many letters, how many voices do you need to hear to influence?
It kind of depends how many you're hearing on the other side,
Okay.
and it probably depends on how big the project is. So it's a difficult thing to say, but the more the better, really. I mean, we had one project in Bristol where we were doing 400 metres of path in a park, and we had 500 people against it and 500 people for it. But those 500 people for had all had to be encouraged to try and balance that out. I think cities across the world more and more are recognising that, yes, the car gives us great freedom and great amenity, but actually it's not right in the city that everyone should be in a car, because it just doesn't work. Examples of places like Paris and the Netherlands and Denmark, and cities across actually Britain, and some of the examples of New York are all great examples where you're seeing a massive change. So in Paris, they've had a 45% reduction in car use over the past 20 to 30 years by reallocating road space. In Seville, they built something like 300 kilometres of cycle lanes in a couple of years, but it's made a huge difference. And very rarely do you see when these things go in that they get taken out again.
I also think it could be a really good idea to perhaps get some tuition on how to ride a bike in a city. I had a look online, there's seemingly tons of initiatives set up to do exactly that. Firstly, I think it's really, really empowering to know that you're doing the right thing. It's going to help build your confidence. And the more confident you are, the better it is. But secondly, you might well learn some really valuable practical advice. Perhaps it might be where you position yourself on the road, so a little bit further away from the gutter and into the middle of the lane. Or it might be perhaps on how to turn across traffic. In a similar vein, perhaps have a look online for social bike rides where a load of riders will take to the streets. Critical Mass is a prime example. These are events that happen in cities all over the world where a large number of riders will head out on a fun and sociable ride. And it helps to break down barriers, help to build your confidence riding in a city, and it also helps to change your perspective on what riding in a city can be, and perhaps make those streets seem a little bit less meaner.
Would you recommend the naked bike ride then?
Absolutely nothing more empowering than a naked bike ride. As well as practical advice like route planning and getting tuition, I do think that our personal perspectives are one of the most important factors governing whether or not we do or do not ride. And I've noticed in recent years there is a real tendency to be more scared of cities. We're being whipped into a constant frenzy on social media, bombarded by fear-mongering articles and this whole war on the roads rhetoric, which I think is total crap. I refuse to be defined by a mode of transport. I ride bikes, yes, but I also drive and I walk and I use public transport. And I think most of you are probably the same. We're all just nice people trying to do our best. Yes, there are exceptions, but I think we should concentrate on the majority because the statistics back it up. I don't have the traffic stats for every country at my fingertips, unfortunately, but here in the UK, cycling has never been safer than it is now. But yet, you wouldn't believe that, would you? I mean, yes, horrible, tragic accidents do happen, but yet, tragic accidents happen every day in cars, but yet very few people, I think, would ever question their safety when they get behind a wheel. But perhaps they should, because one of the best things you can do to improve your longevity and your health is to get out of your car and onto a bike. And there is really, really robust science to back that up. What I mean by all of this is that I think a lot of our perspectives on cycling are slightly disjointed from reality. But I'd be very interested to know what you think. Am I on cloud cuckoo land, or do you agree? And have you got other tips and tricks that might be worth passing on to other people? If so, get involved in the comments section down below. I'd be very, very interested to read your thoughts.